Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is August 18th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update, and we are going to see just how Russia has decided to spin the Ukrainian Special Forces attacks in the Crimean Peninsula. And boy, howdy, it's a level of creativity that even surprises me. Let's get into it. Okay, first off, as always, we've got our daily map update, and guess what? Update says nothing new. We take it back a couple hours, and of course, everything we talked about yesterday, Pisky, Braka, Gadayo. We've got, the movement along the Donetsk, and that tiny efforts to seize Bakhmut. There's been a little bit of progress. It's been just eye-wateringly slow by the Russians. But, of course, we continue to appear to be in the preparatory phase of the Ukrainian offensive towards Kherson, with some contested regions here by the estuary to the west. But let's talk about the real interesting part. Now, as you guys know, the Ukrainian forces have been attacking air bases and ammunition depots in the Crimean Peninsula. And as you guys can see on the map, right, the Crimean Peninsula is a healthy distance from Kherson, but it's a chief logistics and air support hub for forces operating in Kherson. So there's a real incentive for Ukrainian forces to target these air bases and ammunition depots, right? You guys can see on the map that there's big roads leading straight in, and of course, what's not pictured is some major railways also moving into Kherson. And there's been a number of attacks that officially the Ukrainian armed forces have been pretty mum on, but there's some unofficial sources that have attributed them to Ukrainian special forces teams operating in Crimea. Other people have alleged partisans. I believe they're using basically a U.S. model that is most attributed to the Green Berets, where a special forces team with a high level of military skills that allow them to do precision sabotage and precision attacks are combined with the intelligence and local know-how of existing partisan networks. So this would be, for example, Ukrainians who have cars registered in Crimea, Crimean IDs, know the bases inside and out, and who probably, in this case, have been intelligence assets for the Ukrainian special services for a long time, right? They're not going to link their elite special forces up with kind of people they're iffy about. But those two combine, right? The special forces actually make the attacks, and the partisans provide a variety of logistics and transportation solutions. So that is what I think has happened. But of course, it's really embarrassing for Russia to be unable to secure the Crimean Peninsula, which of course they consider their own, and Russia has held since 2014, so nearly a decade. It's pretty embarrassing, and I say this as an American who, had forces in Afghanistan for 20 years and still were totally ineffective at securing it. It's pretty embarrassing to hold a region like this that you claim is actually part of your own country and still be unable to secure it, right? Remember, there were Russian citizens who were on the beach, who were on their summer vacation and watched these air bases blow up. This is like the equivalent of having a, Willow Grove Air Base at the Jersey Shore go up in flames from the Taliban, while everybody at the Jersey Shore is like, hey, look at the fire over there. It's blowing up. What do you mean? Okay. Sorry, it's a bad Jersey impersonation, but that's how they really sound. I'm from Pennsylvania. So anyway, how is Russia spinning this one, right? It seems pretty bad. It's pretty clear that they're at best unable to protect themselves. And initially they said that it was a fire caused by a soldier or air services member lighting a cigarette where he shouldn't have, which now we've pivoted pretty hard. Right? Not only have they replaced the Black Sea commander of the Crimean Black Sea Fleet, but they're trying to keep it, of course, kind of under wraps. But what's more fascinating is Let's see if we can find it here. Yeah, this is it. Russian leadership have been framing the Ukrainian strikes on Russian military assets in Crimea as acts of terrorism. It's not terrorism if it's done by another state whom you are at war with, right? Just like Russian missiles targeting military targets in Kiev are not considered terror attacks, right? They're just considered part of warfare. There's even been missiles as far away as Lviv. So, you know, if you're talking about Lviv on the other side of the front lines, then the believing that Crimea is not a legitimate target, especially when you are conducting airstrikes from Crimea, right? You've directly militarized the peninsula. It doesn't really count, right? Terrorism is violence perpetrated to achieve a political end, which technically means all war would meet that definition. But conventionally, and in most international cases, this involves either non-state actors, and usually it's targeting non-combatants. So if instead of targeting, say, an airbase, if we could prove it was Ukrainian partisans, not armed forces members, and they were targeting, say, nightclubs, then it might meet the definition. But in this instance, it doesn't. It's against legitimate military targets, backed by legitimate military forces, as far as we know. And even partisans it's not as clear, but partisan activity is generally more or less protected by the law of war, as long as it's against military targets. So, how's Russia spinning this? Well, they're trying to say it was an act of terrorism. That's a stretch. But what's even more interesting is that they're starting to draw a connection where the FSB they're not saying they got the people that did it, but they're just letting you know that they neutralized cells of Hizb ut-Tahrir organization. This is an Islamic fundamentalist political organization that's historically been active in Central Asia and in Crimea among the Tatar community, and it's banned in Russia. So they accused the Ukrainian government of coordinating this terror group's operations in Crimea, but didn't really provide any evidence. And it's probably part of a campaign to link Ukrainian partisan and behind-the-line special forces operations with Islamic extremism. That's part of the goal to sort of drive a wedge and make it uncomfortable for the West to support them, even though this is pretty comically, unless they can present some evidence, this seems incredibly unlikely for a variety of reasons. One, this group has not really done anything in probably the better part of at least 5 to 7 years. Second, yeah, they're sort of active in Crimea, but where would they get the resources? Again, they're saying the Ukrainians provided it. It's just sort of ridiculous to be like, oh, actually, it's Islamic terrorism. I'm trying to think of the good analogy. This is like saying that you say, wow, there's an animal on a farm. It has 4 legs and it goes moo. And somebody's like, well, it could be an elephant with a speech impediment. And you're like, I guess, but it's probably a cow, right? When you're like, who could have blown up our airbase? Somebody's like, well, it could be a defunct terrorist organization that's come back from the shadows to suddenly exhibit high-level tactics and top-tier equipment. Or it could be the country you're actively at war with. So this is just a big brain play right there. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me. Of course, you guys may have noticed that even some of my updates now are getting demonetized and run with limited ads and sort of spiked by the algorithm. But if you want the combat video breakdowns, right, of the ambushes, the attacks, the drone footage, those have all moved to my Patreon. Thank you so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. The link is, of course, in the description. And thank you guys for supporting what I'm trying to do out here. See you in the next one.